What's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and today I want to talk to you about the corruption effects that are indeed returning in patch 11.1.5. If you play BFA and play with any corruption effects, like infinite stars, all that kind of stuff, they're back in a matter of a few weeks. Now, getting right into it here. Okay, well, I'll get rid of that. That's THD. Getting right into it. So, there are 6 returning effects in patch 11.1.5. If you play with things like Masterful, Expedient, whatever the crit and verse ones were, I think they were around back then as well. Unfortunately, those are not going to be around this coming patch. However, the ones that gave like damage-based effects or visual effects are returning. So, Echoing Void, for example, the one that randomly built a void around you and would pop at a new stack. I think it was RNG. It does pulsing damage around the player. That effect is back. Gushing Wounds, the effect that put a random dot on your target. This effect in BFA was pretty rare, actually, to see on a piece drop. Also, is back. Infinite Stars, the insane RNG. If your Infinite Stars procs early on a target, mostly played in single target, you would parse like crazy, is back as well, albeit it's tuned a bit lower. A max of 6 stacks, not 10. And less stacking damage. Twilight Devastation. If you were a tank or even somebody that had a meme set towards the end of that actual expansion, Twilight Dev would delete entire packs when it procced. That is also back. Twisted Appendage, the random tendy that spawns in and flays around and does some single target damage, is back. Not too bad from what I've seen in testing. And the last one here is Greater Rune of Void Ritual. This gives secondary stats every second for 20, increasing, and well, there's that. Now, I don't know a whole lot more about these. I've actually dug a bit, and I think there is an article coming out soon, possibly, I would assume somewhere, on like visions as well, which are also coming back in patch 11.15. I'll have some videos coming up in a few days on the channel, probably running some this weekend. If you haven't seen them before, run them before. Hopefully they'll be decent refreshers. There are greater runes and lesser runes of Echoing Void, Gushing Wounds, so on and so forth. You can even see that here. I would assume that you get these from lower visions and then greater visions with more masks. I believe they're up to 8 masks this time in visions. And yeah, now I want to start off here by looking at the single target corruptions we have here, and then get into the AoE ones. I need to grab a Gushing Wounds here because I actually just spent my last one. I also want to say, if you haven't subbed to the channel here on YouTube and wouldn't mind doing so, or at least considering doing so, we're pushing for 100k subs this year. So if you can find it in your heart to do so, I'd love you even more. I love it regardless. Either way, so we have 6 effects here. They are lesser and greater. I don't know where they come from exactly. I don't know if it's clarified. I mean, they're from visions of some sort. This might be lower visions, higher visions, I would assume. These do not stack, to clarify. So now, depending how much they cost, it might not be that big of a deal to swap them from fight to fight. Some fights, maybe you want Infinite Stars. Some fights you want Twilight Devastation, so on and so forth. But if that's the case, you're going to have a lot of things in your bags, and hopefully they make them stackable and not the clutter that they currently are. So a bit more info on these things. Not stackable, obviously. The damage and proc for these effects are also pretty low currently on PTR. I'd expect significant buffs to the damage and probably the proc rate in both single target and AoE, and they also do not seem to scale with your Helm's item level. I believe the Emir to Still Helm enchant, which is very similar to this that we've got in Dragonflight, did scale with item level. I'm pretty sure these do not. I tested Gushing Wounds on this helm earlier, and I tested it on this helm here as well, which is an S1 helm. They both did the exact same damage. So if you're concerned about that, well, don't be concerned. Now I'm going to do some damage here, open up his Destro. Also, it's worth mentioning, things like Twilight Devastation and Echoing Void, these both used to scale with health. They don't anymore. We'll talk about each one individually when we get to that a bit more, though. So, now the first thing we have here is Gushing Wounds. Gushing Wounds was, back in BFA, it was like the rarest corruption that you could get to drop, and when you did, the damage it put out was very, very strong. It's a single target based effect. It's a dot that procs. I believe it doesn't stack. I believe it can reapply quickly. There wasn't, I think, an ICD on it, but it was a very low chance to drop this corruption on an effect. If you even got it on a pair of like blue bracers, you would wear that over epic bracers early on in the tier, going into, I think, Nilotha. It was just that strong. Now, it's important to drive home here for every effect. You don't have Masterful 7, Expedient 7, Twilight Dev 10. You get one effect, and that's it. The biggest strengths of the enchants and things in, or corruptions in BFA, you could stack them. You took more damage, you were slowed more, the more stacks you had of them, but at the same time, they were more powerful. This is just one helm enchant, so you're not going to have Twilight Dev nuking the whole pack down in front of you if you're a tank, likely, but it's still cool to see back, and hopefully they tune things properly. So like I said, Gushing Wounds is a single target effect here. I have it on my helm already. It procs, it can reproc. I don't believe there's like an ICD on it. Haven't really seen. It does not stack or add damage to it like Devouring Plague does if it reprocs. Now, like I said, the effects here, the proc rate of them seems to be pretty low overall. RNG is RNG. Obviously, we're going to open up here. Plater's not working, so unfortunately I can't really show you much here, but there's Gushing Wounds. Already proc, so there you go. Already procking the target. It might end up reprocking in a second here. If it does, I'll point it out for you, but it's that weird, like, blood-looking effect on this mob. I've seen it proc a decent bit of times back to back, but spoilers ahead, the damage is not exceptionally strong. It looked to be somewhere around, like, 0.5 to 0.8% of my overall breakdown in single target. There you go, it procs again. It's doing 24,000 damage every 1 second for, I believe, 8 or 7 seconds. Yeah, it actually reprocced right there. You can see there's no stacking effect on that at all. So, throw a few more Chaos Bolts here. Pull up the overall breakdown. A relatively high proc chance here also, or it's been procking a good bit on this mob in general. So, I would assume the damage would be relatively substantial when it comes to my breakdown. It actually reprocced again right there. But, wait for it to fall and pull up the breakdown. And we are looking at a whopping 1.2%, doing 1,000,000 damage. Now, honestly, it's actually a lot higher than I've seen it in most single target testing. The proc rate seems actually relatively high, or we just high rolled here. But the damage effect is just not tuned properly. They might add in like a scaling effect where it does more damage based on the higher eye level your helm is. Maybe. Probably see to buff it in general, but Gushing Wounds has a single target emphasis on it, right? You're going to play this in single target. On fights where you have one mob, it can spread to other mobs, that it can be applied to other mobs that you're attacking, but it's not an AoE trait. It's not a trait I play on like a council-based fight or in Mythic Plus. This is more of a single target dot effect that procs and does damage, you know, in a relatively short window. When it comes to Twisted Appendage, Appendage is similar to Gushing Wounds. It procs a Tendy, like a Shadow Priest Tentacle, in a sense. It just procs for about 10 seconds and does a decent bit of damage. I've seen, now in BFA, you could get multiple Tendies procking at once, and it actually led to a decent bit of damage. There are some RNG to it. At times you proc multiples, at times you proc none. Let's see if we can proc multiples here. So we're going to Soulfire, drop a rock, put that down, pop some Malevolence. And it's pretty easy to see. It's a tentacle that spawns. I hit a dummy for a couple minutes earlier and didn't see a spawn for about a minute or so into that actual test initially. Hopefully it spawns faster here. It does seem like Gushing Wounds and Echoing Void have higher proc chances comparatively to these, but could just be RNG or, you know, tuning not really being done yet at this point. But hopefully pitching for a proc here. Hopefully getting one soon. There's one right there. So it procced in melee, it stays active for 10 seconds and will flail around and do a bit of damage. You can see it actually just doing some damage there. As far as the overall breakdown, what it did, we're looking at a whopping 0.6%, about 538k, which if you look at, it spawned again here. If you look at how often Gushing Wounds procced on the previous test here, 4 or 5 times, did about 1,000,000 damage. This is doing about 500,000, give or take, per Tendy. The Tendy ended there. You're looking at about 1.1 million. Average hit being 55.7k, with 10 hits per Tendy. It does not like do AoE damage. It's just a single target effect. But I would assume, like in BFA, it still can proc multiple times and have multiples active at once. I haven't seen it yet myself, but I'd assume that behavior is still sort of there. But once again, the damage is pretty small. I believe the actual helm enchant in Amyrtasil was around, I think, like 3 to 4% of our overall damage. This is below 1%, and it actually had 2 decent procs back to back. So we'll see where it goes. Honestly, between the two, Gushing Wounds and Appendage, not a big difference, likely. If you're playing that for whatever reason, you probably just err on the side of whatever sims higher in single target, and, you know, go from there. We'll look at Infinite Stars in a minute here. We have to do something interesting with that. It's not proccing on dummies. We can make that one work, well, soon here. Now, as far as AoE effects go, so you have Twilight Devastation, you have Echoing Void, and you have Void Ritual. Now, Void Ritual is a weird one. I can show it to you. It's just basically, it procs and gives you a stacking secondary effect. And it has relevancy in single target, has relevancy AoE. It's a stacking secondary single target effect. If I can find that again here. It's 151 secondary stats every second for 20 seconds. It's sort of like a little trinket effect that procs. Now, depending on how the tuning is with this, it might just end up being, it's likely it'll probably end up being your best like universal trait. Twilight Dev being a bit more AoE based, Echoing Void being probably more AoE based, and when it comes to Gushing Wounds versus Tentacle, I mean, you've got some single target relevancy there. Or some AoE, I guess some AoE relevancy, and plus it procs multiple times, but it's not really doing an AoE, just like, you know, more targets, maybe a higher chance to proc. Either way, so we're just going to open up here. I'll watch for the actual effect to be active. I'm not sure what the proc rate is. I didn't even test it earlier, actually, just because I didn't really feel like I needed to. When it procs, right? So we're going to cast Malevolence here, lagging a bit on PTR. That's okay. Nobody seems to mind. And we're looking for a buff Echoing Void. Not Echoing Void, it's Void Ritual. Sorry, very different. I'm not sure if there's a visual effect that comes out with this either or not. This is I have Kazan. This is Authority of Radiant Power. There's Burn to Ashes. There's Radiant Power proccing again. That's a jackpot from the Warlock tier set. Right there. This is my Ascension enchant. Like we said, RNG is RNG. And yeah, there you go. There we go. There's my Void Ritual. I am participating in a Void Ritual. I don't see myself accruing any more stacks here. Is it just stacking naturally? It is not. Wait. I can't. Oh, it is. There's two different buffs. There we go. Yeah. All stats increase by 1665, 1817. You'll hit 20 and it will eventually fall off. The end is coming. And honestly, like, this could be one of the stronger effects you get. I mean, giving you like a 3k, it's like 3k at 20 stacks or whatever, but giving you that stack and secondary stat increase actually could be relevant. You can see how it's relevant in single target as well as AoE. When it procs at M+, it just procced again right there, basically back to back. You can see my stats increasing here, 33, 34, 43, 79, so on and so forth. I'll keep it going here. 35, 81, 25, 26, 36 probably in a second here. So it's that stacking secondary side effect. It's passive. You don't really have to deal with like any Twilight Dev controlling the direction it goes or whatever, or being in melee like you have to deal with Echoing Void. It's just basically there and gives you secondary stats. So we'll see where that goes as far as sims and things are concerned, but that's like the single target slash universal ones. Let's look at the two big dogs, well, two or three. Echoing Void, Twilight Dev, and Infinite Stars. Now, when it comes to the two AoE-based corruptions here, you have Echoing Void and you have Twilight Devastation. I'm saving Infinite Stars for last because I gotta do some weird tricks with it to show you guys in the field over here with some dummies probably. We'll figure it out. We're gonna look at Twilight Dev first here. I'm not gonna drag it out because, hey, everybody wants to see it. Twilight Dev in BFA was exceptionally strong if you were a tank. I even had a meme set towards the end of the expansion when you could just buy corruptions. Twilight Dev in BFA dealt more damage to the mobs that were hit by Twilight Dev based on your health pool. At the same time, you could proc multiple Twilight Devs back to back, which would do insane damage, just nuke a pack down. You could see a tank doing like, you know, tank damage in a pull and M+, larger one, and just jump to first by a commanding amount because they proc Twilight Dev twice. The health scaling thing has been removed here. They've capped it at 1,000,000 damage to enemies in front of you. Now, the interesting part about this is when I was testing it earlier, it's not 1,000,000 damage like per target. It looks to be 1,000,000 damage spread evenly among the targets that it hits. It's not like it hits for 5,000,000 damage here with 5 targets. If there were 4, it'd be 4,000,000. I think it's like just 200k to 5 like each here, which makes 1,000,000. If there's 4 targets, it'd be 250k. I could be wrong there. Obviously, crits happen and things as well. But so I want to show you how this looks, and well, yeah, go from there. So I honestly, on the higher end, or I guess the bright side, if you want to play Twilight Dev for whatever reason, you're not a tank. Well, there's more relevancy to that right now compared to what there was before. I don't think I have an M+ build in here. I do. Cool. We'll rock this. Now, like I said, a lot of these effects, the proc chance does seem... What's happening here? Having some problems. Still having problems. It's all right. We're going to reload and fix that. The proc chance does seem very low on Twilight Dev. I'm not really sure as to what they're going to do with that. I would assume they buff the proc chance or hopefully buff the damage as well, because Twilight Dev is like probably one of the most iconic corruptions out there, outside of like Expedient and Masterful that were used by mages and locks and things. You think about corruption, there's Twilight Dev. Blasting packs down, right? So we're gonna stand here. I think the angle still matters a little bit. If it procs off the pole, great. If not, whatever, we'll go for the whole duration. If you've seen Twilight Dev before, it looks the same. So it's that big blue beam that spawns in. I'm not gonna do like an optimal rotation here in AoE because I'm just gonna hit buttons and hope it procs, but fingers crossed for an earlier proc than a later proc. Twilight Dev. Ian, throw me a bone here. Throw me a Twilight Dev. I even seen 2 proc almost back to back. There it goes. There's the big beam. Boom. Now, unfortunately, if you look at the actual damage it dealt here, well, you know, it's 1.43 million, it ain't too high. It did crit once, so that it's about 1.3 million, I guess, give or take, a bit higher than what I said in the tooltip. I think there definitely needs to be some like buff to this, both probably both proc rate wise as well as damage wise. But seeing that effect come back is just cool. Super sick effect. I mean, it's like the iconic corruption, right? And honestly, now if you're, even if you're not a tank, you can play it as a DPS or maybe even a healer if you want a DPS. But realistically, you'll probably see more melee using it. I believe the range on it is relatively far, but if you're standing way back here and it procs, I'm pretty sure we can try it. I don't think it'll actually reach the mobs. I'm not sure the actual. We can go max distance here and try actually. Let's go as far as we can, see if this makes it. I'm not gonna get a proc here. Watch this. Now that I'm back so far, this effect and Echoing Void, which we're gonna look at in a minute here, both require, I'd assume, require you to be closer to melee. Unless this procs behind me and just goes that direction. So it's procking, it's going, and that ain't gonna make it. So that ain't gonna make it either. But it's these guys are getting blasted. But so you can see RNG is RNG. It still can proc back to back essentially, but you probably need like a 15-yard, 10-yard max radius to get full value out of Twilight Devastation. Now, when it comes to the last corruption we have here, it is Echoing Void, the last AoE one, I should say. This is a unique effect as well. So when Echoing Void came out in Battle for Azeroth, this was the strongest effect that you had in early corruption, maybe besides Gushing Wounds and things, but Echoing Void, it does damage around you. You have to be in melee of your target or targets for this to do damage. When it first came out in BFA, it was very, very overtuned. You had your whole raid standing in melee. Casters were in melee, locks were in melee, just pulsing on the mob, whether it was M+ or rating alike. Now, the way this works, your damaging abilities have a build the Echoing Void. Each time it builds is a chance for it to collapse. So it's basically a stacking effect. It does 25k to all nearby enemies every 1 second until no stacks remain. Now, I've seen this stack to 4 or 5. I haven't seen it really stack past there before it collapses and starts doing damage. The visual effect is not super easy to see, but it's like a pulsing purple damage around my character. We'll proc it here, but you have to be in melee. So this is an AoE effect. It's not going to be that good in single target when they get tuning done. You have to be in melee with this. So likely playing it more on a melee-based spec or something like that, unless you just want to be in melee for whatever reason, playing, a caster. We're going to open up here. Put the rock down, pop some trinkets and all that stuff. You can see this effect on my character right there. Echoing Void. Echoing Void is coalescing, and now it has 2 stacks. Now it has 1 stack because it procced, so it actually already procced at 2 stacks, and it dealt 2 pulses of Echoing Void to these mobs. I'm gonna wait for it to stack again. There we go. There's 1 stack right there. It's coalescing. I've seen it hit 4 or 5, like I said, at max before it just begins, expanding or whatever. It's at 2 stacks now, so I'm gonna hit 3 pretty soon as well. Give it a second or two here, and it might collapse at 3. It hits 3, does not collapse, so we're going past that. Bit of RNG. Here come my add-ons breaking again. I don't know why, but we're going to ignore that for now. And there's 4 stacks. Now it's collapsing. There's that pulsing damage around my character. So you can sort of see it there. The damage that it puts out is not the best. You're going to have to deal with that sound in the background. Let me just mute this because welcome to PTR. Unfortunately, we had 20 hits, so that's 5 individual pulses. We have 5 targets here. No. We have 4 targets. How many do we have here? We have 5. So that's basically 4 different pulse effects or whatever, each hitting, mobs, whatever, right? 5, 10, 15, 20. And the average pulse was about 15.6k. 11k being normal hit, crit being 23, which is a bit lower than the tooltip. I think it'd be cooler if they added an effect to this where, like, you had a way to control the actual, like, collapsing void, maybe popped it at a certain point where it had higher stacks. If you were, like, in a more prolonged AoE setting. I have visions of this effect sort of proccing in like M+ at the end of a pack when you have 8 stacks, and it procs when the last mob's dying and you waste all your stacks, right? RNG is RNG. They could buff the damage considerably and make it so like, hey, if that happens, it's unfortunate, but it hits really hard when it procs properly and stuff. But for the most part, Echoing Void will likely be, I mean, it could be a play. It could be one of like the better effects if you're melee based, looking for like that like cleave-esque profile around your character. But when it comes to like single target and such, I don't expect Echoing Void or Twilight Dev to be the worthwhile corruptions you play. You're likely looking at probably for like just general consistency in single target Gushing Wounds or the actual stat effect, which is Void Ritual. If you're maybe even Appendage here. If you're looking at more AoE, if you're melee, I mean, Twilight Devastation obviously can be pretty good if you're a tank or melee. If you're a caster, honestly, for AoE, you're probably just like playing Void Ritual. It scales in single target. It scales on AoE, or the stats scale your player's value, however you want to word it, your character's value. So we'll see where it goes, but that's how it looks so far. And yeah, hopefully they're buffed in the near future. And I saved the best for last here. Finally, we have Infinite Stars. Infinite Stars is one of those, like, when you think about corruptions, you think about Masterful, Expedient, but then like the damage-based effects, you think about Twilight Devastation and Infinite Stars. Infinite Stars was one of the high RNG effects when it procced in single target early on and you got a lot of stacks for the effect, which buffed subsequent effects proccing on the target. You could just jump ahead of everybody else in damage. It was pretty insane. On fights like N'Zoth, where he had a 99.9% damage reduction, not 100%, you could hit the boss when he was doing intermission things, even when you were running around killing tentacles, to try and stack Infinite Stars if you were playing it for whatever reason, to get more burn on the actual boss when he became, when he started taking damage, essentially. Fights like Shadhar, fights that were single target based, you see people stacking Infinite Stars on, trying to get an insane amount of high rolls RNG early on. There are some fights I stacked to like 6 or 7 within half a minute. It was just nuking the actual boss. You had so much more damage than everybody else in the raid. That has been adjusted a bit in 11.15. Keep in mind you can't stack Infinite Stars anymore either, but they also made the max damage stack increase 6 and not 10. Used to be 10 in BFA. It deals 140k arcane damage and increases the damage taken from your Infinite Stars by whatever, by 38k. Let me rephrase that. The thing hits the target for 140k and increasing their damage taken, like the target taken, but the target's damage taken. It's late, I'm tired. By your stars by basically 38k, 40k, stacking 6 times. So if you have 6 stacks of this, the thing's taking basically 230,000 more damage per each Infinite Star hit, because 40k, it's like 240, 230, give or take, times 6. Yeah. Florida math is doing about, what, 380k when you're at 6 stacks here. Now, the unfortunate part about Infinite Stars, I can't show you this on a dummy, because it was bugged on dummies in BFA, and unsurprisingly, 8 years later, it's still bugged on dummies. But I can show you on some mobs here. Hopefully it'll proc. If it does, it's some big white beam that shoots out and blasts mobs into the ground. So, can I get some stars procs? Can I get a stars proc? I don't know if Dot's actually proc this thing or not, but we're going to see. I need to chase a bunch of yaks around, try and find one that won't die, that will live. There, bam, there's the stars. There's the stars. Even Thalki, I was happy about it. The damage was recorded actually. Yeah, it hit for 166k. So basically what it says in the tooltip. That effect can stack multiple times. Like we said, if you high roll early on in a patchwork fight, you're going to have 5-6 stacks in the boss before a minute. You're probably going to put out a decent bit of single target damage if you keep proccing that effect. Now, the downside, it's not very good in M+ or AoE fights. It is a static buff on the targets you're fighting. So if you're fighting mobs at M+ like these and they die fast, there's not much relevance to it there. But if you're fighting a boss like Sprocketmonger or Lockenstock, or if you're fighting a patchwork-based boss or whatever you're doing in single target, if you're there for a while, Infinite Stars could be pretty strong, like it was in BFA. So thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video and hopefully help clarify a little bit on some of these corruptions that are coming out in, honestly, I think 3 weeks or so, give or take, with patch 11.1.5. I played in BFA. I'm old. I'm 34. I remember these corruptions. They were fun. Once again, I don't expect them to be crazy OP like they were at the end of BFA, but even having the effects back is sort of cool. It feels a lot like the Helm enchants that you had from Amir Dasil. I think it was, yeah, Asteroid Dragonflight. A bit of damage, nice little effect, a bit of a buff to classes and players in a mid-tier patch, 0.5, and yeah, we'll see where it goes. If you guys want links to the Wowhead article or any week wars or add-ons that I used, links to all down below in the description, as well as up here. And like always, a massive thank you to all my supporters on Patreon. Like every time, just y'all, thank you so much for all support. I greatly appreciate it. If you're looking at supporting on Patreon, there'll also be a link up here, as well as down below in the description. As far as the estimated date for patch 11.15, I think I heard it's April 22nd. Like, I haven't heard, but people are talking about that. I think there's some achievements in there for Children's Week, and I think that begins on the 20th, the 22nd, or like the 29th, whatever the end of this month is for April. Could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be somewhere around there. And if you haven't done Visions before, or haven't, looked at them a whole lot, like I said, probably put some runs up on the channel this week. They were fun. I enjoyed them, and yeah, hopefully they buff these effects a little bit, because they're a little lackluster. But regardless, having them back is cool, and we'll see where it all goes. Thanks for watching, guys. If you liked the video, hit the like and sub buttons below. Helps out a ton, and I'll catch you again soon on stream. Peace.